the MindFire portal becomes your portal, and it ends up being branded towards however you want that to look like. Okay, so you'll get an access point or login to the system, and you could use the standard MindFire access point or the white labeled version. They all access the same backend from that perspective. So you'll log in based on the user that you have, and we have what we call our sub accounts, and that's ultimately each of your clients would have a siloed database in our system. So the data is never really commingled. Certainly you could run multiple clients out of one database, but typically speaking, for PII and all the different SOC 2 and HIPAA, etc., you'll house those in separate sub accounts. So when you log in, you could access client A versus client B versus client C, and you can control the access levels that each of them have on the back end. It's a very standard portal that you log into, similar to Amazon Web Services or SendGrid or email platforms that you may have logged into. The left-hand side is really all of your features, and those are all controlled by you. You can limit them to, I only want my client to see dashboards. I want them to maybe import data, different levels of access, and you can control that. And that's all on the left-hand side here. So theoretically, you could be an admin, you could build campaigns, but you could have your client only access to, say, dashboards. So that's just the inner workings of the dashboard itself. And there's certainly more granular access levels that you can get for each of the different tabs. And I'm not going to go real deeply into it. I just want to give you a general high-level overview of how you work within the confines of the system. Just running down the list on the left-hand side. So we have what we call our dashboards, and that's where we're going to drill down and have access to all the different types of dashboards, custom dashboards that you may have built, standard dashboards that are baked in, etc. I could show you some of those with some real data here shortly, just quickly. This is where you're going to build. We have two types of campaigns in the system. We have our drag and drop infrastructure, and that's really just draw up from scratch. You create a new campaign, and basically the world's at your fingertips. You're going to bring out your target audience. You're going to build your landing page, your email cadence, follow-up nurture sequence. All of that is drawn up from scratch. That is how you would ultimately build your campaign. So if you had a direct mail campaign that was leading to a microsite, and you wanted that microsite to say, hey, send a follow-up webhook to my CRM, we would just draw that out. And Cloud Connect is our webhook app that allows you to basically make posts to any sort of third parties. And then you want to send a follow-up lead alert email to my agents. And then I also want to send a thank you email to my client or prospect who's filled out the form. Basically, that's how the system works. And inside of each of these elements, you have the ability to pull in content from the outside. You can copy paste your HTML in directly. You can right click and pull it from our asset library. We have an asset library where you can upload assets or build and draw up HTML content. Or if you have HTML content on the outside somewhere hosted on S3 or external data source, then you could just paste your URL to that here. So that's pretty much how the content works with the system. And the same goes for your microsite. So you go into your microsite now, and I could build a full-blown multi-touch landing page where if I'm going to add a contact, would be my guest, my girl. If I'm visiting as a PURL, I would come here. If I'm visiting through a QR code, I would have another page. We really control the design and the workflow, as it were, based on your requirements or your needs for that campaign. We can host JavaScript files, CSS pages, JSON objects, text pages. Those are all required for some use cases. Yeah, so the way that works is inside the content here, you would right click and you have access to your contact fields. And these are all the variable data pieces that are driven by your database when you set that up. So there would be an account configuration at the very beginning where you would actually go in and you would define, here's a bunch of fields that are already defined in this account. But if you need to add fields, adjust fields, change data types, You manage a lot of that here. And then once you've added them here, they're now all available with intra-campaign element level. So that's your contact fields. We do have what we call our system variables also, which are variables based on scoring and events and goals that you would have defined within your build as well. So at every element level, say my email, I want to add attribution for my emails and say whenever somebody opens an email, I want to give them a goal of contact opened email, or I want to give them a score of, say, maybe +5 because I have a scoring mechanism where if somebody reaches a score of 50, I want them to call it a warm lead. So there's definitely scoring. And they also have, if somebody fills out a specific form value, you could pull that form value within the content. Session attributes are things like the IP address that they're visiting from, the browser that they're coming through. There's an unsubscribe link that we use for all of our emails. The contact history you can inject for a lead alert email. So all of that's accessible via a one-touch variable. So you don't have to know what that is. We'll inject it based on a certain context that we leverage. We use this pound infrastructure or pound variable context structure. So all of your variables are going to start with a pound and end with the pound in the content. So if it's a first name, it's just pound first name, pound address, that type of thing. We do have what we call rules though. So you could define your own variables based on a construct of rules. So if they're from California, I want them to see one version of the variable. If they're from Illinois, I want them to see a different variable. Yep. And the way that works is you go into our rules engine, you create what we call a rule group. And then once you have that rule group, you can just create a variable. So you could say, maybe this is your video variable. That would inject as pound video in the content. You would put your JavaScript or link to YouTube or whatever that would be here. And if I want to add a rule and say from California, then I would add that rule construct for that variable. Or you could just control it by the data. You could theoretically, at the data level, have 4 or 5 variables and just control it by the field tied to the data that's imported into the system. So this is where you build. We do have a blueprint section in our campaign building where you could build from some predefined workflows. We have what we call our blueprints, and they're a little bit more step 1, define your domain. Step 2, define what pages you want to have. Step 3, add your triggers. It's very much user-led and less like just creating something from scratch. If you want to keep something in the box, we have a really simple, easy, you could launch a campaign in 15, 20 minutes if you know what you need to do through this process. This is like, where are we going to send them if it's a blind redirect, or when they hit their thank you page, you want to have a button that sends them out to your website once they're done. Here's your landing pages, your welcome page, your survey page, your thank you page. You can pull from a myriad of forms that you've created, certain page settings. Do I want to put a webhook post to Zapier at the end of it? That's a very in the box approach, but a little bit more straightforward. So we have 2 ways that you can proceed. This one allows you to just be very straightforward. We have a documented step-by-step approach. And then the other is, do you want to create something from scratch and templatize it yourself? So those are the 2 approaches. We'll still track informed delivery, PQR and PURL, and whatever other media that you're using through this mechanism here, but it allows you to do it super simple, straightforward launch. The other methodology through the workflow that I showed you there, that allows you to build from scratch. And you could access either one. If you use our pre-built blueprints, you could still go behind the hood and add some stuff on the workflow behind it, because ultimately the workflow is driving those blueprints behind the scenes. So if you want to do a simple blueprint, hey, I just have a redirect, but now I also want to do a 3-step webhook to my CRM with some custom rules, you could certainly go back behind the hood and do that as well. They're collaborative. We do have an asset library where you could host your assets. It's behind the scenes, it's all S3 Amazon hosted. We typically recommend that if you are going to host your assets yourselves, that you use something that is highly available or redundant, like an S3 type scenario, not like a FTP server that could theoretically go down or something like that. But certainly you could use our asset library. And then we have what we call our data services. And this is where you would set your import data into the system and define what type of Perl generation are we going to have? Are we going to go deep into creating rejections on errors? And are we going to auto export the data to your FTP environment? This is where we get deep into the data configuration of the platform. And we typically would set up some sort of automation where you would just drop it to an FTP based on the criteria set in this initial setup. It would wake up every so often and go pick up a file if it saw it there and automatically import it and spit it right back out to your FTP, never having to really have a touch to the file on the MindFire side. That's typically the path that most of our clients will take because most jobs are ongoing and you might have multiple data files that need to follow a similar practice. Certainly you can manually import them as well. And you define your dedupe and what in the data file is your dedupe. Is it a unique identifier? Is it a combination of first name, last name, and the street address? You completely control those yourself, as well as what the PURLs is generated on. Is it the first name and last name? Is it the company? Is it a predefined value that you're passing to us? We're pretty open to anything that you might need to do. And by the way, we have a data processor that can do manipulation to your data as it comes in. So if we need to concatenate two fields, or if we want to truncate the value if it's over 20 characters, there's different cool things you can do with that as well as it's coming in. That is MindFire doing it inside the platform, but we need the serial in the mid to be able to connect the dots there. Typically, and that's where we could either take the IMB and separate it out ourselves using our data processing process, or you could just have it in the data itself, the serial and the mid. And as long as you run that personalized informed delivery campaign through your portal, then we will be able to tie it to that serial and mid and tie it to the PURL. That is something that is specifically using the serial and the mid as a unique identifier on our side to tie it back to your record. Yeah. As long as we have the ability to get a data feed from mail tracking, we can show it in our dashboard as custom events. What's cool about that is you get it all under one hood, but also you could theoretically trigger off of it. So if you want to trigger an email saying, hey, your mail's out for delivery, go check your inbox, or even add them to a custom audience in Facebook or do something like that, you now have events to persist and do something with it. And if they get the mail, but they don't visit the landing page, now you have a no action event. So you could target somebody if they did not do something. That's where that tracking data comes in. Now, I will say what I've learned over the past 6 months is even without the mail tracking piece, we give you the kind of mail sent event, which is the mail targeted. It's not the delivered, but we still can capture the informed delivery visit, the PURL visit, and the QR code visit, and any other visit that you may have. And you could still provide attribution percentages based on the total targeted. You just don't have the delivered that comes. So I think it's, in some cases, it's really nice to know that out of your mail, how much was actually delivered, and out of your informed deliveries, how many people actually opened the email. But really, the true attribution at the end is, did they actually click and follow through and do something and convert? We get all of that no matter what, just by the nature of how the PURL works and the QR code works and the informed delivery matchup works. So the data service works in conjunction with the campaign that you create. So there's a piece of data configuration, likely automation. We have encryption, PGP, GPG if you need to, inside that passing back and forth. You control the data structure on import and export. And ultimately, we typically give you the PURL and the QR code string, and you would handle the generation of the QR code itself. But we do have the ability to create the QR code image file and share that with you as well in the processes. The dashboards really are defined by you. We do have standard pre-built structures, which is your mail targeted versus PURL, PQR, informed delivery visit. And if we want to ingest any downstream data on the back end, once somebody converts through the CRM on your client side, they actually make a sale. We could then webhook post that data back into MindFire and show that conversion, attribution, dollar amount, or even just an event saying they did that thing. And now you have the complete picture, as well as if you have a third-party website that we want to end up tracking at the end, say they go through the form, but then they're ultimately buying on your client's website. We could have a pixel on that website that says, okay, once they submit the process on that side, it makes a call back to our end and then comes into your reporting as well. That's not an area that historically your clients have wanted to share, but we're finding more and more now that we're showing everything under one dashboard that they have that ability. If you're doing the groupings by mail kit or by decile or by whatever other group you have in the data, you're able to see which one's performing better from a monetary perspective or even just a conversion perspective. So now with postal hikes and all the promotions, etc., you're able to give a valuable attribution back to your client and say, okay, we should spend more money here, maybe send less of this one. If you don't know which one's actually converting, then, some of that's harder. Theoretically, you get all that by the PURL, QR, and the informed delivery visit, but ultimately the actual true conversion or the process that happens once they leave the system is really showing the true value. Yeah, so everything that we technically do right now is homegrown, but we integrate now with Amazon QuickSite. We're still playing through a little bit how we want to leverage it or go to market with it, just because there's the AI pieces that you can leverage. You could have the intelligent language build of the dashboard, etc. So we have an integration with QuickSite that hasn't gone to market yet, but we've deployed it for 2 to 3 clients. What we have baked in here is core to MindFire. So the dashboards that we create and we build are all proprietary based on the MindFire data, but we can also ETL the data anywhere you'd like it to go to. But we have the ability to schedule and hook the data to somewhere like an S3 or to, if you want Power BI or you have your own SQL server that you want the data to go to, we can stream the data there as well. And then you could use your own visuals from that perspective. But one of the future state things that we're working on right now that we realized is more and more as data grows in direct mail at scale, we need a way to house historical data. So we're in the process of doing everything data lake as well, along with what's in our real-time dashboard. And that's very similar to what you would get on a QuickSite ultimately. It's large, big data, very scalable and very customizable from a dashboard perspective and visualization layer perspective. Many of our clients do use our standard BI dashboards for the real-time analytics, the PURL, the PQR, the last 30 days, which mail kit performed well, etc. When we need to do something a little bit more custom, complex, and the data's grown to millions and millions of records, 40 million, hundreds of millions of records, we typically will take the QuickSite / data lake route, because now you're talking about large quantity of data that you want to do group buys and analysis on. And that gets to be tough to do in some of our standard under the hood dashboards.